Well, good evening, everybody. And just first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and play, pay our respects to elders past, present, emerging, and recognise their continued connection to the lands and waterways. And we acknowledge our shared responsibility to care for and protect our place and people. So I will now declare the meeting open for the Tuesday, the 23rd of May, 2023. Just a reminder that the meeting is being webcast, and please make sure that filming and photography are not permitted in the chamber, and anyone observed to be filming the meeting will be asked to leave. So it is a very warm welcome to everybody in the gallery and those who are watching along at home tonight. Last night's public forum was the first in a 3-month trial to ensure that the community and all other impacted stakeholders are getting the most out of the opportunity to address Council, and that's with the executive team present. Essentially, this trial is a pulse check to see what's working or what could be improved, and various trial measures have been put in place during this 3-month period to test out. And these include moving the public forum to the Monday night prior to the ordinary Council meeting to allow for the Council to hear the speakers' perspectives and consider them for 24 hours prior to making the decision at the Council meeting. It's very difficult for any councillor at a meeting to hear comments from maybe 2, 3, 4 public speakers for and against and go straight into an agenda item and trying to balance it out. People do need time to look through and understand what people's points they are making. We've lengthened the speaking time from 3 minutes to 5 minutes to allow extra time for speakers to make their statements. And also, if we are not full up with people speaking on items on the agenda, we are able to take council speakers who must register, who can talk about council-related matters which are not necessarily on the council agenda. So that just does allow us to get councillors in the future to perhaps hear other points of view which may not have been on the agenda. I want to make it absolutely crystal clear that this is a trial only, and that the Council will be going through full community consultation about the changes. And the feedback that Council receives from the community and other stakeholders will be recorded and used to decide whether any long-term change, if any at all, will be made. Now, I do want to extend my congratulations to the Central Coast Mariners. They're one of the most underfunded teams in the A-League competition, but they clearly play way above their weight, so to speak. And they won their match against Adelaide, and for those who were able to attend, and I was lucky enough to be able to be there, it was just the most amazing experience, hearing the noise, I guess the drums, the horns, the whole box and dice, if you like, was just an absolute fabulous thing. And so now the Mariners are off to basically to Parramatta to enjoy the grand final. So I hope that a lot of people can go along and attend that. The Mariners are definitely hoping that it'll be a sea of blue and yellow, and I hope that that happens. It also showed, when you're there, to see over 20,000 people leaving the stadium. And I have to say, in talking to some of the key people there, the owners of the Mariners and so on, the comment was made, just wouldn't it be great if they could just move across the road, Central Coast Highway, and into an entertainment precinct and enjoy, the aftermath of a well-deserved victory. Now, volunteer roles at Council. National Volunteer Week was celebrated this month, which acknowledges and celebrates the valuable work that volunteers do all across the country. And I was very pleased to be able to attend the New South Wales Rural Fire Service Central Coast District Volunteers Day on Sunday. And it was just an amazing event where there was over 100 volunteers receiving medals for all sorts, long service, medals for valour and so on. And it's just great when you hear the stories from the volunteers and the families that support them. And I can't put out a big enough thank you to our volunteers, particularly those in the RFS. During the week, Council announced its new pilot program, which provides an opportunity for residents to give back to their local community. The 12-week Visitor Services Young Ambassador Pilot Program has been designed to provide real industry experience and networking opportunities for young people that can help them generate pathways into the tourism industry. And if you want any more information around that particular thing, head to the Entrance Visitor Information Centre, the Regional Gallery, or join the Environmental Volunteering Program. Now, we're also attempting to keep the community updated on our current roadworks across our road networks. What we're doing is we're putting up every week where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing, so that the community can keep in touch with where we're actually going to be working and exactly what sort of roadworks are going to take place. So it's done via a social media post, and it develops things such as where we're doing pothole repairs, where we're doing heavy patches, and where we're actually doing full road renewals. So check all that out on Facebook. And what have we got out for engagement at the moment? Well, we're currently consulting on Pelican Park upgrade concept options. We've got 3 options out there. I think we've had over 250 responses already to that, which is fabulous. And I'm pretty clear that I think we'll probably run with whatever the most popular option is, we will probably run with. So we'll just have a look at that when it's fully serviced. But head to Your Voice, Your Coast and put your vote in. We've also started some work at the entrance. We've had crews and machinery down there, out on the sand berm at the entrance. It's a proactive program of works, which we're trying to move sand from the sand spit at the entrance and relocate it further north to re-nourish some of the eroded areas that occurred in the last 2 or 3 East Coast lows that came through. And this will put us in a much stronger position, having done that work, if any flood mitigation works are required during this winter. Now, it's 2 months, believe it or not, since the state election. I must admit, time has gone quickly on that one. And I have to say it's been great to continue that strengthening relationship that Council's been able to have with the state and federal governments. I've been advocating to the new state government and our federal politicians for the funding and support that the Central Coast deserves to ensure this community receive what it needs. And I have to say, when I'm talking to our local members, they are very, very supportive of trying to get money for our community, both at the federal level and at the state level. And with that, I'm going to close my comments tonight, and we'll look forward to the meeting agenda. And we'll move into the first item, being item 1.1, and disclosures of interest. So I will ask firstly about the staff. Have they got any? I don't believe so. Now, for the sake of absolute transparency, I will disclose that I am a resident at the premises, the subject of report item 2.9. I have no financial interest in the building as I am a tenant, and the tenancy is funded by Council pursuant to my employment agreement with the state. Council staff have notified the Office of Local Government of these facts and have advised me to declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary conflict of interest, which does not require me to excuse myself from consideration of this report. I have also completed a form which is available for public viewing. So with that, I'm now going to move that we receive the report on disclosure of interest and note the advice. Item 1.2, which is the confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Clearly I was present at the last meeting, so I've read the minutes, so I'm happy to now resolve to adopt the resolution that is shown on the screen. Item 1.3, which is the notice of intention to deal with matters in confidential session. As has become the norm with us, we do not discuss matters that need to be dealt with in a closed session. So again, I will resolve to adopt the resolution that we note no matters have been tabled to deal with in a closed session. Moving into the substantive, our regular item and our first 2 items, which are items 2.1 and 2.2. I know by now that the monthly financial report and the investment report for April 23, that the CEO, Mr. David Farmer, will speak to both of those.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This month's monthly financial report to the end of April and the accompanying investment report are best considered in the context of our third quarter financial review, which occurs later in the agenda. That document looks forward. These 2 particular reports take a picture at a point in time. At a consolidated level, Council continues to perform soundly, year to date with a $33 million surplus, which is $6 million better than budget. Cash is stable at $700 million, and debt continues to reduce at $293 million. There are positive working funds in General Fund, net of Drainage Fund, Sewer Fund, Domestic Waste Fund and Water. Our key ratios are all acceptable in accordance with our financial strategy, apart from the unrestricted current ratio, which is just below the benchmark. However, that unrestricted current ratio doesn't take into account $24 million in cash, which we have restricted to early repay the emergency loans that expire in December. So if we included that money, which we have set aside to repay those loans, we would exceed that benchmark. We're reporting capital expenditure of $120 million year to date, which is behind our budget of $137.8 million. But I should point out it's roughly $47 million better than the same time last year. So we've made a significant improvement in our delivery of our capital works, aided of course by some better weather. Council's investments of approximately $700 million are invested in accordance with ministerial orders with approved deposit repositories such as banks and government and treasury corporations. In summary, Council is in a sound financial position and is continuing to work roughly in accordance with budget.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Well, it's just great news to hear that we're still able to maintain our current performance. I have just quizzed the CEO on the fact that our forecast is only a $7 million surplus. He's trying to assure me that we might do a little bit better than that, particularly when our current surplus is showing at $33 million. But there are some other things that have got to be added in, which we have to take up in the accounts, which will bring it back a bit. But nonetheless, I think Mr. Farmer's hopeful, and obviously I am hopeful, that we will do just a little bit better than that. And again, we will be seeking to put more money, if you like, into that reserve that Mr. Farmer mentioned in order to be able to repay as much, if not all, of the debt by the end of this calendar year. Another comment I will just make, it's the New South Wales Audit have just come out with their assessment and performance audit of the Office of Local Government. In all the fine print amongst that, it's not a particularly good report, I might add, for the Office of Local Government, but if you wish to see it, go to the New South Wales Audit New South Wales website and you'll be able to find the document there. It was released to Parliament today. But one thing that is important to note in there, they talk about the fact that the OLG is not able to measure how an organisation is travelling financially, particularly when it is only a quarter report and particularly when the fourth quarter, if you like, the final annual report, councils are seeking extensions and they're not getting going to the Office of Local Government before Christmas. So you can imagine how hard it would be for any political person sitting in governance of that if they haven't seen an annual report for the previous year and they're already halfway through the next year. So I think it's a pretty valid point, but you will note with our monthly reporting, we are probably the golden-headed people. So with that, I'm going to comment. I'm just going to resolve to adopt the resolutions for items 2.1 as shown on the screen, and there's nothing further to add to the investment report, so I will also resolve to adopt the resolutions for item 2.2 as shown on the screen. Now we move to the third of these reports, which I have to say we have to do. It's one we have to do, the quarterly report. That's laid down by the Act that we must do that report, but it is, if you like, already a month behind the April report that we've just covered off. But anyway, there's a lot of other detail in there, so I'm going to ask Dr. Howe and Ms. Rakamallara to actually talk to that.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This report, as you mentioned, provides an update on Council's progress with delivery of its adopted 2022-2023 operational plan as at 31st of March 2023. Out of the 153 actions identified in the operational plan, 28 have been completed, 90 are on track and 2 are scheduled. So we're currently at 78% performance rating year to date. 24 actions are delayed due to unplanned interruptions, resourcing needed for other priority activities, more refined project scoping, or Council is awaiting information from other agencies. 9 are either on hold or closed. Highlights for this quarter include exhibition of a draft housing strategy for the Central Coast, delivery of destination management plan actions, including a new landing page for the Love Central Coast website, and commencement of a digital program to assist tourism industry members to improve their online presence. Council has delivered 15 major events, including the Central Coast Music Festival, Flavours by the Sea, and the Love Lanes Festival, which attracted over 115,000 people. This outcome has exceeded our target of 10 major events attracting 100,000 people. There have been almost 10,000 bookings of community facilities this quarter, and visitations to our libraries have been strong, with over 400,000 visits year to date and around 93,000 uses of computer and internet services. At its February meeting, Council resolved to progress a detailed business case for an in-vessel composting of food and garden organics. And in the last quarter, Council has desexed and microchipped almost 200 animals and collected over 5,600 cubic metres of rack from Tuggerah Lakes, which exceeded our annual target of 5,000 cubic metres. We've had another successful little tern breeding season, with the terns now returned to the Northern Hemisphere, including 31 new fledglings. And our first successful return of around 130 loggerhead turtle hatchlings at Shelley Beach after eggs were incubated at Taronga Zoo. I'll hand over to Ms. Racklamara for an update on Council's financial performance over this period.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. As part of this process, we also review Council's budget, and you've heard a little bit about it already, so I'll just keep it brief. Currently, we have identified that a projected increase in budgeted operating income of $12.9 million. Of this, $6.7 million relates to better than budgeted income from interest on investments because of rising interest rates, and other favourable budget adjustments include revenue from certain activities continuing to recover post-COVID. Our operational expenditure is projected to increase by $21.2 million, and this includes an increase of $30 million in depreciation and asset adjustments, which has been offset by savings across various programs in the organisation. This revised projected surplus is based on a strong focus on delivery of programs as the financial year end gets closer. Based on these changes, Council projects a surplus of $7.1 million for the year ending 30 June 2023. Capital expenditure of $6.9 million will be reallocated to the next financial year to better reflect the anticipated delivery date. As at 30 March 2023, Council had $706 million in cash and investments and sufficient unrestricted cash to meet operational requirements, as well as to provide for loan repayments. In summary, Council is in a sound and stable financial position, and although facing some challenges such as rising costs and supply chain issues, we're making strong progress on capital projects and projecting a satisfactory end-of-year surplus. This will enable us to plan for early debt retirement, continued service delivery, and future capital projects. Council is now reviewing its long-term financial plan to ensure service delivery and infrastructure provision to the community continues to be underpinned by sound, stable, and sustainable financial positions. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, it's just good to hear. As I say, that data, in terms of the financial data, is pretty much a month out of date already. But the other data is, of course, is a good chronology of where we've come to and what we've been able to actually achieve over the period. And I have to say, the Little Terns is just such a fabulous little story. With that, there's not much further to say about that, other than to move the recommendation and adopt the resolution as shown on the screen. We'll move to item 2.4, which is the determination of water, wastewater and stormwater drainage charges for 2023. Now, Mr. Harris spoke to the council last night at the public forum, and after the public forum, Mr. Loader and myself had the opportunity to have an at-length discussion with Mr. Harris, and hopefully he got a good understanding from Mr. Loader about the questions that he had raised. But in order just to make sure that those who are watching on the internet do hear what Mr. Loader's responses were, which I concur with, I have asked Mr. Loader just to put some of the responses up on the screen so that those who are watching can actually understand what Mr. Loader said to Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. So what we've actually done is summarised Mr. Harris's questions from his presentation last night into three key points, and I'll just provide a response to each of those for the record now. So the report before Council tonight is an administrative report which requires adoption of our fees and charges for water and sewer services prior to them being approved by the Minister for Water. This report's not intended to be an update on our performance or our proposed targets for the 23-24 year. We actually do that via the operational plan, which will be before Council for consideration at the 27th of June meeting. However, I can provide a brief update on how we've performed to date this year and also what we're planning on doing next year. So since July 2022, we've upgraded 20 kilometres of sewer mains and we've replaced around 5 kilometres of water mains. We're also on track, all those works, I should say, are part of a $65 million capital works program, which we're intending to deliver by the end of this financial year. In terms of next year, in addition to a range of operational improvements, we've also got an $80 million capital works program, which consists significantly of the commencement of construction of Marty water treatment plant upgrades, as well as the design works for upgrades to Charmhaven and Gwandolin sewage treatment plants. In regards to the second question, which was around whether any of the revenue we're receiving this coming financial year will be used to provide infrastructure for the Gosford waterfront development. The infrastructure that we're currently upgrading in Gosford is 100% grant funded and is not funded by our revenue from our customers. And that infrastructure is designed to future-proof Gosford for future residential, commercial and industrial development, obviously which, if the Gosford waterfront project proceeds, that will benefit from that upgraded infrastructure as well. The last point was around our water security plan and a question around what percentage of the revenue we're receiving next year will be allocated for water security. I guess in response to that, our water security plan is a plan to ensure we have adequate water supply for our community until 2050. That is an adaptive plan which responds to uncertainty around climate change and other factors. And we've designed that plan to be adaptive for that very purpose because of that uncertainty. In terms of the coming year, this current IPART determination for the next 4 years, we have $9 million included in that determination for works relating directly to the water security plan. $2 million of that is for the coming financial year. But anyone, if you are familiar with the water security plan, you'll recall that the majority of the large investment in future water projects occurs towards the end of that plan, and that will be subject to future funding submissions to IPART. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Loder. As Mr. Loder pointed out, this is a paper that we have to put up now because under the IPART rules for water and sewer, we must publicise the new rate for water and sewer 1 month prior to implementation. We don't have to do that for our other fees and charges like waste fees and charges and so on, but it is a requirement for water and sewer from IPART that we do publish it. Hence, this paper is there purely to basically publish what the new rates will be 1 month prior to the implementation of them, which will commence from July 1. The other thing to note in there is that they've gone up by what IPART determines the pathway and the speed of the increase. They set that for the council. Council doesn't have a say in that, and they also allow to be applied the multiplier for the CPI increase, which by the Bureau of Statistics was 7%. So the rates have also gone up by 7% that was set by IPART, and that you have to contrast and ask the reason why, to be quite honest, why why the rest of the rates from the general rate side only get a 3.8% increase when both are subject to the same inflation. But anyway, that's a question for IPART. With that, I will now move the recommendations shown on the screen for item 2.4. We'll now move to item 2.5, which is the Central Coast Conservation Fund draft policy. Did I get that word right?
Thank you, Mr Administrator. On the 22nd of November last year, Council resolved to develop a draft Central Coast Conservation Fund policy. This policy is an action from the Central Coast Biodiversity Strategy, which was adopted by Council in 2020. The aim of the fund is to support conservation outcomes across the Central Coast. It's proposed that the fund would be fed with income from activities such as biodiversity stewardship agreements and incorporate the Davistown Wetlands Acquisition Fund. Consultation in the development of the draft policy has been undertaken so far with Davistown Progress Association and Council's Catchments to Coast and Coastal Open Space System Advisory Committees. The 22nd of November resolution required staff to consider expenditure of Davidstown Wetland Acquisition Funds in the design of the Central Coast Conservation Fund. In considering this element of the resolution, staff proposed that rather than being specifically addressed in the policy statement, the treatment of those funds within the broader fund be dealt with by way of council resolution when the final policy is brought back to council. There will be specific consultation on the use of these funds as part of the proposed upcoming exhibition process. I'd just like to also note that during the development of the business paper for this meeting, a typographical error was introduced to the draft policy document, inadvertently replacing the word conservation with the word conversation throughout. Staff propose that an amendment be made to part 1 of the resolution to correct this error prior to public exhibition. The draft policy, if you resolve that way, Mr Administrator, will be on exhibition for not less than 42 days, and we would welcome community input on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. I have to say, I was reading the paper and I could read conversation, but my brain was telling me it was conservation. So I didn't pick it up either. So your staff are excused a little bit. What I do want to point out for those who are potentially watching on the internet, for those people living in Davistown and are concerned about the Davistown wetlands, I gave a commitment earlier on that their funds of approximately 1.4 million would be, if you like, quarantined and kept to be spent in that area. So I still intend that to take place whilst this goes out for conservation. Just want to assure those residents over in Davistown that you will see your 1.4 million in the final paper, the final policy it's in the attachments to the final policy. So with that, I will now endorse the recommendations that are shown on the screen for item 2.5. And we'll move to item 2.6, which is endorsement of the draft service optimisation framework, which again is Dr. Alice Howe.
Thank you. It's proposed that Council adopt a service optimisation framework to support its ongoing review and optimisation of service delivery. All councils in New South Wales are required to include a program to review their services in their works program by the 1st of July 2025, following the next local government election. Council's current operational plan includes an action to develop a framework to inform the service optimisation process. The draft framework has been developed through research and engagement with leading council and industry experts, including Northern Beaches Council, Blacktown City Council, and the University of Technology's Institute of Public Policy and Governance. Engagement has also been undertaken with Council's CEO, directors and unit managers, and Council's Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. Endorsement of the framework ensures a structured approach is taken with the review of any service and builds on the business improvement work already undertaken within the organisation. Should Council resolve to adopt the framework, staff will identify and include in the operational plan for next financial year proposed services to be optimised. It's proposed that this work be supported by a small team drawn from existing staff resources with an associated budget. Following adoption of the operational plan and budget for next year, staff would commence the first initiative in July with regular progress updates to Council, the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. No, I have to say, I think this is a very good improvement, if you like, put forward by the Office of Local Government to go into the IPNR, which is the Integrated Planning and Reporting Guidelines, because it does mean that the staff do have to now look at each service and work through, is that the best delivery method that they're looking at? Can we get the cost cheaper? Can we be more efficient with it? That is the idea about these service reviews, is to see if we can actually do the business or service at a better price and or provide a better service to the community. So there's a lot of value in that, and I'm delighted to see that we will be commencing that off, I guess, this year. Is that the case? We will be commencing that this year, where I guess the staff will choose 2 or 3 areas to look at, and they'll go into those in depth to see if we can't do it better. So very good outcome, and great to see that we're on the way with it. So with that, I'm going to now endorse the recommendations that are shown on the screen for item 2.6. Now we move to item 2.7, which is the outcome of the exhibition of the planning proposal related to 231 Pacific Highway and 20 Ashbrooks Road, Mount White. And I must say that I did receive a very late email from a Mr. Lawler. Came in, and I think it's 3 something or other this afternoon. And just in answer to Mr. Lawler immediately, the majority of the questions and points you're raising are related to the DA. And to DAs, we are not considering at this meeting. The DA will be considered at another time. We are only considering the planning proposal at this point in time. So I'll just make those comments in relation to Mr. Lawler's remarks to me. Now, Dr. Howe, I think you're going to talk a little bit more to it.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the planning proposal to seek amendments to permitted uses at 231 Pacific Highway and 20 Ashbrooks Road, Mount White, was considered and exhibited concurrently with a development application for some rural tourism activities on the same premise. So those submissions are considered separately. So this matter, as you mentioned, Mr. Administrator, just deals with the planning proposal, which is to amend the Central Coast Local Environmental Plan to include permitted uses, as shown on the screen, for a restaurant at 20 Ashbrooks Road, rural tourism at 231 Pacific Highway, and to apply gross floor area limits for each of these additional uses. The planning proposal for these sites, as I mentioned, was concurrently exhibited with the DA. 6 submissions have been received on the planning proposal, identifying potential traffic, noise and water pollution impacts. Submissions also raise concerns about the compatibility of the proposal with surrounding land uses and the privacy of neighbours. Noise has been mitigated by the inclusion of gross floor area caps, which limit the size and scale of the development. There'll be no direct access to the sites from the Pacific Highway, with further intersection and parking treatments to be identified at the DA stage. There is no groundwater extraction associated with the proposal, and appropriate controls can be applied at the DA stage to manage on-site wastewater disposal. Land use conflicts have been limited by specifying the areas of the site on which the additional permitted uses can take place, which are located as far away as possible from neighbouring properties. And further measures to protect privacy and amenity will be considered at the DA stage, along with any other issues raised in submissions, such as the one you received today, Mr. Administrator. The last step in the planning proposal process, as shown on the slide on the screen, so should Council resolve to support the proposed additional permitted uses on the site, Council officers would refer the planning proposal to the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces to amend the Central Coast LEP. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. Look, I have to say, Saddles is a destination. The number of people that do travel up, it is a superb place to go to. It fits with a whole range of our other planning documents. For the way agribusinesses can be developed, it's the way tourism businesses can be developed, and it does provide accommodation and a very limited number of that, I think probably in the order of 20-odd units or that type of size. And bear in mind, because of the sewerage requirements there, this is the capacity, the maximum capacity that the site could actually take. So there is no opportunity to actually increase it from this planning proposal size and the floor space size that Dr. Howe mentioned, simply because the treatment for sewerage and so on has to be managed on site, and it is that only capacity is what's going to be at that. So it'll be a full capacity there. So I think from an overall perspective for the Central Coast, I'm very comfortable that this is a great addition to the Central Coast. It's already, as I said, developed the big reputation as a destination, and I'd be surprised if there's people up here who haven't actually visited it. Certainly I have been a number of times, and it is an absolutely fantastic, and it's a place I take visitors to who are coming up to the Central Coast. So with those comments and the comments from Dr. Howe, I'm delighted to be able to move this through to the actual plan making stage, and I will therefore resolve to adopt the resolutions associated with that as shown on the screen. Item 2.8, which is the outcome of exhibition and public hearings for 7375 Man Street, the Gosford planning proposal for reclassification of council-owned land. This is the old council chamber area. Now, I think, Alice, you've got some more slides for us.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This report seeks to conclude the reclassification process for land adjacent to Council's former chambers at Gosford. 73 to 75 Man Street is part of the site identified for a new TAFE campus at Gosford. In order to facilitate the transfer of the site to the New South Wales Government, it's required to be reclassified from community land to operational land. The proposal was exhibited from the 2nd of February to the 2nd of March this year, with a public hearing held on the 30th of March. 6 submissions were received, of which 5 were objections. In addition, 7 speakers addressed the public hearing. Key issues raised included that the land should not be sold while council is under administration, that there is a need to retain the land for community benefit, that there is no pressing financial imperative for the sale. Concerns were also raised about the consultation process and that no alternative site for a performing arts centre, for which the site was originally acquired, has been identified. Council has previously considered these concerns when determining that the highest and best use of the site would be for its redevelopment as a TAFE campus to support the revitalisation of Gosford and provide enhanced educational offerings to our community. The land is surplus to Council's needs, and a site for a major cultural facility has been identified as part of the Gosford waterfront proposal. The reclassification process has been conducted in accordance with New South Wales Government requirements and will be no different were an elected council in place. This planning proposal is also at the last stage of the LEP amendment process. Should Council resolve to support the recommendation, Council officers will request that the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces amend the Central Coast LEP accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. And just again, as a reminder, when this site was originally purchased for the Gosford Cultural Precinct, at the time, you have sort of 30 days where you have to nominate whether it's going to be operational or community land. And in this case, unfortunately, no one mentioned the fact that it needed to be classified as operational land, as the balance of the sites had been. So it was a mistake made back then. This does correct that mistake, and it now does allow us to fulfil the sale of the whole of that site to the New South Wales Government for a TAFE to be constructed there, which will then free up the current TAFE site for, we hope, some housing, and hopefully Landcom will go down the track of housing and including, obviously, affordable housing amongst that mix. But as Dr. Howe said, if we can get the waterfront project up and running, there is space there which clearly we think could well be some form of an arts centre or performing arts centre or cultural centre. And we have had very early discussions with Darkinjong about potentials for things like that. So with that, I'll move to conclude this one and resolve to adopt the resolutions for 2.8 as shown on the screen. Item 2.9, which is the Fire Safety Inspection Report for Residential Flat Building, 6 Pine Tree Lane, Terrigal. My building.
Thank you. As reported at the last meeting, Fire and Rescue New South Wales has undertaken an inspection of 6 Pine Tree Lane, Terrigal, in relation to the management of combustible cladding. Council is obliged to consider what measures Council, as the appropriate regulatory authority for local level fire safety matters, should take to mitigate the risks identified in the report. Council staff have inspected the premises and recommend that an order be issued to the strata manager to undertake the fire safety measures identified in Fire and Rescue New South Wales report. This is a function that Council is unable to delegate to staff under section 377U of the Local Government Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. Well, I'll now resolve to adopt the resolution that is shown on the screen. Item 2.10, which is the Central Coast Academy of Sport Sponsorship 2023. I think, well, you're going to speak. Yes, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. The Central Coast Academy of Sport was founded in 2004 to provide locally based sports development opportunities for athletes, coaches, officials and administrators within the New South Wales Central Coast local government area, and has historically received financial support from the former Gosford City and Wyong Shire councils and has been supported by Central Coast Council since amalgamation. The Central Coast Academy of Sport is a not-for-profit organisation and is dependent on financial support from the New South Wales State Government, Council and corporate partners to ensure they have the necessary financial strength to operate on a day-to-day basis. Since inception in 2004, the Central Coast Academy of Sport has supported the development of 4,388 local athletes, supported 7 local athletes who have represented Australia at various Olympic Games, produced 41 Australian representative athletes. The provision of funding over a 3-year period provides greater security and enables the organisation to undertake longer-term planning. The financial support of $45,000 per year can be funded through existing operational budgets within the Community and Recreation Directorate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I'm delighted that the organisation has been able to find some money to support athletes. Supporting young people in active careers, being active and so on is something, given our current trials and tribulations that we are suffering in some other parts of the area, does mean that we are keeping some people focused on good things as opposed to getting wrapped up in some things that are less desirable and antisocial behaviour. So pouring some money into keeping people active, allowing people to be able to move forward and hopefully represent eventually Australia. It's no greater thing could we actually do for our young of today. So I'm delighted that I can actually support this particular 45 grand and over a 3-year period, giving some certainty to the Academy so that they know what money they've got and how they're going to go forward. So it's great delight. I'm able to actually resolve those the resolution shown on the screen for item 2.10. And then we look at item 2.11, which is the Community Support Grant Program, which comes up every month. And we've got, I think, 6 or 7 recipients this time round. We've got the Volunteer Marine Rescue New South Wales at Mooney Mooney, the Country Women's Association of New South Wales, the Youth and Performing Arts, or YIPA, for some money, Mannering Park Precinct Committee, Surf Life Saving Central Coast, Mingaletta Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Corporation and the Terrigal Trotters Club. So delighted again that we're able to support those entities. Bear in mind that these are matched grants. They're only up to $5,000. And at the end of this, Ms. Smith, I notice we'll still have some nearly $60,000. I hope you've got a means of getting rid of $60,000 in the last 2 months that you've got to go. Anyway, when we've got the money, I'd like to see it get out there. So we've still got 60,000 to go. So any of those who are listening and you feel you've got a worthwhile cause and you can meet the criteria, put a bid in. With that, we will move the recommendations that are shown on the screen for item 2.10 and accept those as a decision of council. 2.11. Item 2.12, which is recommendation from the 30th March 2023 Protection of the Environment Trust Committee, otherwise known as POET. I think Dr. Howe is going to just make a couple of comments there.
Just to note that this report seeks a resolution to release funds from the Protection of the Environment Trust to 4 community-based environmental projects, as recommended by the Trust at its meeting of the 30th of March 2023. This funding is $12,200 for ecological survey of the Pearl Beach Arboretum, $4,500 to Matecham Hall Management for feral fox control, and 2 grants to the Peninsula Environment Group, $3,200 for Yamana coastal sandplain woodland improvements, and a further $1,200 for community education associated with the Woy Woy Community Garden.
Thank you, and I'm certainly not going to stand in the way of the recommendations of the POET. With that, we will move on to accept the resolutions as shown on the screen and make those as a decision of council. The last item is item 2.13, which is the People and Culture Unit Manager and a transition to the senior staff contract. This has become a particularly normal way forward where we seek to put our level 3 managers onto a senior staff contract, which gives us a lot more flexibility as an employer. And with that, I'm quite happy to support that, and we'll resolve to adopt the resolution as shown on the screen. And with that, that brings us to a conclusion of tonight's meeting at exactly 7:17. With that, I and 1 or 2 others, I think we'll go up the top and have a yarn with you, and hopefully a cup of tea or coffee. Thank you.